Imagine walking past your own father on the streets, not recognizing him in the least. Now, what if the father you dismissed as a mere beggar was a billionaire testing your loyalty? This was the shocking reality for Chijioke, who learned the hard way that wealth and privilege don't shield you from the truth. When his father, disguised as a beggar, approached him for help, Chijioke's decision would not only break his heart, but shatter his perception of love, family, and loyalty. The consequences of this test will change both their lives forever. In this gripping tale, you'll witness a billionaire's bold test of loyalty, one that will reveal shocking truths about family, wealth, and compassion. The story follows Chief Obinna Okafor, a man whose fortune hides a deep concern for his son, Chijioke. When disguised as a beggar, Chief Okafor sets in motion a life-altering trial that will force both father and son to face their deepest fears and desires. Expect unexpected twists, emotional upheavals, and revelations that will leave you questioning the true meaning of loyalty and love. The legendary figure at the heart of this story holds a powerful secret one that will forever change their bond. Lagos, Nigeria's sprawling commercial heart, pulses with energy. From the vibrant markets of Lekki to the gleaming skyscrapers of Victoria Island, at the very edge of this thriving metropolis sits the mansion of Chief Obinna Okafor, one of the wealthiest men in the country. His estate is a fortress of luxury, an expansive villa with towering glass windows, lavish gardens, and priceless art lining the walls. The billionaire's life is a testament to his success. Designer suits, private jets, and an exclusive circle of friends who are equally powerful and influential. Chief Obinna is not just a businessman. He's a self-made empire, a man who clawed his way up from humble beginnings. But beneath his polished exterior lies a deep, unspoken fear. His only son, Chijioke, has been raised in the comfort of wealth, surrounded by every luxury imaginable. However, Chief Okafor can't shake the feeling that his son doesn't truly understand the value of loyalty and compassion, values he himself fought hard to instill. Though Chijioke is the apple of his eye, Chief Okafor senses a growing divide between them. The boy has become obsessed with his privileged life, his friends, his social media presence, his flashy car, and has begun to lose sight of the family values that built their fortune. Chief Okafor fears that his son sees wealth as the ultimate goal, rather than the relationships and character that should define a person. With this fear weighing heavily on his heart, Chief Okafor decides to take drastic action. He will test Chijioke, not with words or conversations, but through a lesson that will expose the true character of the boy he has raised. Chief Obinna Okafor sat quietly in his study, the faint hum of the city outside a distant reminder of the wealth and influence he commanded. His fingers tapped against the mahogany desk, each tap resonating through the silence. As the head of one of the largest conglomerates in West Africa, he had the world at his feet. Yet, the one thing he couldn't grasp was his son. Chijioke had been raised in the lap of luxury, surrounded by the finest things money could buy. From designer clothes to the latest gadgets, nothing was out of reach for him. However, as the years passed, Chief Okafor began to notice subtle changes in his son. Chijioke, once humble and full of promise, had started to slip into a world of vanity. His social media feeds were filled with extravagant parties, flashy cars, and constant displays of wealth. The boy had become more interested in maintaining an image than in cultivating meaningful relationships. Worse still, Chief Okafor feared that his son had lost touch with the values that had shaped their family. It was a painful realization. Obinna had worked tirelessly to ensure his son would inherit not just his wealth, but also his wisdom. The values of loyalty, humility, and love had been instilled in him from a young age. But now, it seemed as if those teachings were falling on deaf ears. Chijioke's world was one of privilege, one where money solved problems and status was everything. And in that world, Chief Okafor no longer felt like a father, but more of a financier, someone Chijioke turned to for luxury, but not for advice, nor for a meaningful connection. One evening, after another cold dinner between father and son, Obinna stood by his office window, staring out at the vast city beneath him. He could hear Chijioke's laughter from the next room, a reminder of the distance that had grown between them. In that moment, the billionaire's heart sank. He had spent his entire life building this empire, but was it all for nothing if he couldn't even connect with the one person who mattered most to him? That night, after Chijioke had gone out with his friends, Obinna sat alone with his thoughts. He knew something had to be done. But what? How could he get through to his son? How could he prove that loyalty was more valuable than the shallow sparkle of wealth? It was then that the idea struck him, as sharp and clear as a flash of lightning. He would test Chijioke, but not with words or accusations. No, this had to be something deeper, something that would force his son to confront the very essence of who he was. The next morning, Chief Okafor began to set his plan into motion. He enlisted the help of his most trusted staff, giving them instructions to prepare for what seemed like an unusual request. But Obinna knew that, to truly understand the depths of Chijioke's heart, he would need to strip away the layers of comfort and privilege that defined his son's world. The following week, Chief Okafor disappeared from the public eye. No one knew where he had gone, not even his staff. He was a man who was always surrounded by assistants, drivers, and bodyguards, but now, he was alone in a mission that would test the very core of his family. The plan was simple. He would disguise himself as a beggar. He would go out into the streets of Lagos, the very city that had helped him build his fortune, and sit among the beggars and the homeless. No wealth, no grandeur, just a man in need, just another face in the crowd. But what he didn't realize was that this decision would not just test his son's character, it would force him to confront his own deepest fears and vulnerabilities. For in that moment, Chief Okafor wasn't just testing his son, he was testing himself. Could he truly be humble enough to step into the shoes of someone who had nothing? Could he withstand the humiliation of being ignored and rejected by the very people he had once served? As the days passed, Chief Okafor walked the streets of Lagos in his tattered clothes, silently observing the world around him. He watched people rush by, oblivious to the man sitting at the side of the road. Some avoided eye contact, others threw him a quick glance, but no one stopped. No one offered help. This was the city he had built his empire in. Yet it was a city that had no room for weakness. Here, only power mattered. Only success. It was a harsh realization, one that made him question whether his son would even acknowledge him if they were to meet. Little did he know, Chijioke was also going through a transformation. While his father was out on the streets, testing his own humility, Chijioke was back at the mansion, facing a crisis of his own. A moment of deep reflection had come over him, a sudden, unsettling realization that his life of luxury was no longer enough to satisfy him. He had achieved everything he'd ever wanted. Expensive cars, designer clothes, exclusive parties, but there was an emptiness inside him that he couldn't ignore. That morning, Chijioke had been faced with an uncomfortable encounter with one of his closest friends, a wealthy socialite who had once been a role model to him. The conversation had turned unexpectedly serious, with his friend mocking the idea of family and loyalty, suggesting that, in their world, only wealth truly mattered. "Your father's old-fashioned," the friend had said with a dismissive wave. "Money is what gets you ahead. Loyalty, compassion, that's for the poor." For a brief moment, Chijioke had been caught in the tension between his father's teachings and the superficial world that surrounded him. He didn't have the answers, but a small seed of doubt had been planted. Was it really just about money? Was there something deeper that he was missing? Still, Chijioke pushed the thought away. He had his friends, his wealth, and his status to protect. What else could he need? But as fate would have it, the next day, that seed of doubt would be tested in a way he couldn't have imagined. As he walked down the busy streets of Lagos, lost in his thoughts, he saw the beggar dot at first. Chijioke barely noticed him. He was just another face in the crowd, a man whose pitiful appearance made him blend into the background. But then something shifted in him. The beggar's voice, low and desperate, called out to him. "Please, sir, I haven't eaten all day. Could you spare some change?" Chijioke stopped, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the beggar's face. The voice sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. The man's face was covered in grime, and his clothes were so ragged that they seemed to be falling apart. For a split second, Chijioke felt a flicker of recognition, but then, he quickly dismissed it. He had no time for this. He had places to be, people to meet, and an image to maintain. He turned away, but something gnawed at him. His heart pounded in his chest as he kept walking, the beggar's voice echoing in his ears. "Please." The voice grew quieter. Chijioke didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. Could he? What happened next would forever alter their lives. But for now, the mystery of the beggar, his true identity, remained unsolved. Would Chijioke recognize the man in need as his father, or would he walk away, blinded by his wealth and pride? Only time would reveal the answer. As the days passed, the sun rose and set over Lagos with an almost indifferent rhythm, casting its warm golden light over the bustling streets. Chief Obinna Okafor's experiment had already begun to show its first signs of success, although the results were far from what he had anticipated. Every day, he sat quietly on the streets of Lagos, hidden beneath the disguise of a beggar. Each passing hour felt like an eternity. But Chief Okafor was resolute. He was waiting for a moment, a sign, a gesture from his son, Chijioke. Meanwhile, Chijioke was trapped in the very world that had begun to feel suffocating. For all his wealth, he felt a hollowness growing inside him, a gnawing sensation that his life, though full of material comforts, lacked something essential. His mind often wandered to the conversation he had had with his friend, Ugo, the night before. Ugo was one of those wealthy socialites who believed in nothing but money. He had always told Chijioke that loyalty was a weakness in the business. The world, that true power came from alliances with those who could help him climb higher. But Chijioke had begun to feel uneasy. He had witnessed his father's generosity, his constant acts of kindness towards people who had nothing to offer in return. Obinna had always emphasized that wealth was not an end in itself, but a tool to help others. Yet, as Chijioke moved through his world of luxury, he began to wonder if there was truth in Ugo's cynicism. Was loyalty just a facade? Was compassion only a luxury for those who could afford it? Despite these questions swirling in his mind, Chijioke still couldn't shake off the feeling that he was trapped in a world where appearances were everything. Every interaction was filtered through a lens of status, and every moment of connection was based on what someone could offer him. Was this what his father had meant by loyalty? The first twist in the story came when Chijioke, after ignoring the beggar once, found himself walking down the same street the next day. He had no particular reason to be there, but fate seemed to nudge him in that direction. He passed by the familiar cafe, where he had met his friends just the day before, and saw a man sitting on the sidewalk once again, his face hidden under layers of dirt and a ragged scarf. For a moment, Chijioke felt an unexpected pull in his chest. The man's voice rang in his mind, and a strange feeling of recognition washed over him. "Please, sir, could you spare some change?" The voice sounded like something out of a dream, haunting yet familiar, but Chijioke shook the thought away. No, this couldn't be. He had to stop thinking like this. It was probably just another beggar asking for alms. He had no time for this nonsense. And so, he walked past again, more quickly this time, ignoring the pang of guilt that clawed at him. What Chijioke didn't realize was that his father had been waiting for this very moment. Chief Okafor had expected his son's first response to be one of indifference after all. He had built an empire on the idea that people could be manipulated by their desires. But what Obinna didn't account for was the nagging feeling of doubt that his son couldn't shake. Was it guilt? Or something else? Chijioke was struggling to reconcile the world of his upbringing with the emerging doubts in his heart. His father's teachings had always seemed so simple: compassion, loyalty, family, but the world he lived in now was much more complex. There were new opportunities, new people to meet, and endless distractions that constantly pulled him away from what really mattered. But the deeper Chijioke sunk into this world of luxury and wealth, the more his father's absence was felt. And what made it worse was that Chijioke couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital in his life. The self-reflection that had begun to gnaw at him after Ugo's conversation was intensifying. He started to feel that he was losing touch with something that could truly define him, something beyond his father's money, beyond the Instagram-worthy life he was leading. Then came another unexpected encounter that would further complicate his emotions. Chijioke's best friend, Ugo, had been by his side for years, but lately, their relationship had started to feel like a mere transaction. Ugo was the kind of friend who would always remind Chijioke of his father's wealth, of the power that money could bring. He made no attempt to hide his cynicism about loyalty, claiming that loyalty was only a valuable trait when it came with a return on investment. But in the last few weeks, Chijioke had started to feel like Ugo was pushing him towards something he wasn't ready to fully embrace: a cold, calculating mindset. It was at a party that Ugo introduced him to a mysterious businessman, Mr. Juma, who seemed to have a silver tongue. Mr. Juma was one of those men who could convince you to sign a deal before you even understood what you were agreeing to. But there was something about him that made Chijioke uneasy. He wasn't just another wealthy man. He was a figure shrouded in whispers, an enigmatic presence in Lagos, known for making impossible deals happen. Some people said he had the power to change destinies, while others spoke of him in hushed tones, hinting that his rise to power had come at a cost. Yu-Gi-Oh was clearly enamored with Mr. Juma, introducing him to Chijioke as someone who could help him reach new heights. But Chijioke wasn't so sure. There was something off about Mr. Juma, a dark energy that Chijioke couldn't put his finger on. The more he interacted with the businessman, the more he realized that Mr. Juma didn't value loyalty or integrity, only results, no matter the means. It was the kind of ruthlessness that Chijioke had been warned about by his father. But now, it was coming to him from all sides. It was tempting, yet chilling. As the days wore on, the tension in Chijioke's mind grew stronger. The beggar he had seen twice was beginning to haunt his thoughts. Was he merely a stranger in need? Or was there something more to his presence on that street? Why had the man's voice felt so familiar? And most importantly, what would it mean if that beggar was his father? Chijioke couldn't escape the questions. But the more he asked himself, the more questions he had. What would happen if he acknowledged the beggar as his father? Would he help him? Would he even recognize him? The mystery of the beggar, the growing doubts about his world, and the tension between the people around him were leading Chijioke to an inevitable confrontation with the one person he feared facing the most himself. Little did Chijioke know, the man he had ignored twice was not only testing his loyalty, but was also teaching him a lesson about what truly matters in life. Would he choose the comfort of his friends and their shallow pursuit of wealth? Or would he return to the values his father had tried to instill in him all along? And if he made the wrong choice, could he live with the consequences? The streets of Lagos were as chaotic as ever. The honking horns, the vibrant colors of the marketplace, the street vendors shouting to be heard above the noise, nothing seemed different. Yet, to Chijioke, everything had changed. He had walked past the beggar once more, and then again. The uncomfortable sensation in his gut had only grown stronger each time, like a weight he couldn't shake off. The last time, he had been walking in the same direction, heading towards his favorite cafe where he met his friends for lunch. But something pulled at him, something deeper than the typical guilt he had ignored the first time he passed by the beggar. It wasn't just about pity anymore. It was about recognizing something he had been avoiding for years, a loss of connection, of meaning. There was a part of him, perhaps, the part that was still tethered to his father's teachings, that felt like he was missing a vital part of himself. And that part was painfully glaring now, as he found himself face to face with the beggar once more. But what really stopped him this time, what really twisted his insides, was the beggar's eyes. He had felt it before, that strange sensation of recognition that his mind had refused to accept. It wasn't just the ragged appearance, nor the pleading voice. No, it was the eyes. They were familiar. They were his father's. His heart skipped a beat. He knew what he was thinking. He couldn't be sure. Could he? No. This couldn't be true. This was just another beggar. Someone who had captured his attention because he was perhaps too lost in his own confusion to focus on what truly mattered. Still, Chijioke couldn't push it out of his mind. The question lingered. What if? His feet began to move, almost on their own accord, pulling him back towards the beggar. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if his body was being forced into the path of a collision with fate itself. When he was close enough, Chijioke hesitated. His gaze fell to the man sitting on the curb, dirty, ragged, the picture of destitution. But as Chijioke looked deeper into the beggar's eyes, a strange realization struck him. He wasn't looking at a stranger. He was looking at someone he knew, someone he had known his whole life. This wasn't just a beggar. In an instant, the beggar's voice cut through the thoughts that were spinning out of control. Please, sir, I haven't eaten all day. Could you spare something? It wasn't just the words. It was the tone, the vulnerability in his voice. This was not just a man asking for help. This was a test. Chijioke's mind raced. Was this some twisted joke? Was his father playing some elaborate game? He stepped closer, his pulse quickening, his thoughts in chaos. A sickening realization flooded his chest. Could this truly be his father? The father who had always emphasized the importance of loyalty, compassion, humility. The man who had built everything from nothing, who had provided him with a life he had come to take for granted. His father, the billionaire, now sitting in the dirt, asking for help like any other beggar. Father? Chijioke's voice cracked as he spoke the word before he even realized he was saying it. His body froze, as though his voice had betrayed him. The beggar's head jerked upward, his eyes locking with Chijioke's. There was no mistaking it now. The recognition was mutual. Chief Okafor, his father, slowly removed his tattered scarf. His once sharp, well-kept features were hidden beneath a scruffy beard and the grime of the streets. His eyes, those deep, familiar eyes, pierced through his son's shocked expression. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The bustling noise of Lagos seemed to fade away as time stood still. I wanted to see if you would recognize me, Chief Okafor finally said. his voice surprisingly steady despite the circumstances. But you didn't. Not at first. Chijioke's stomach twisted in a way he had never experienced. A pang of guilt and shock shot through him, leaving him breathless. His father, this entire time, it had been him. Chief Okafor, the man who had given him everything, who had taught him about loyalty and compassion, had disguised himself as a beggar to test his son's heart. And now, standing before him, was the painful truth. Chijioke had failed. His father had asked for help, and Chijioke had walked away twice. He had dismissed him as another beggar, just another person in need. He hadn't even recognized the man who had given him everything. Father, Chijioke stammered, struggling for words. I didn't know. I thought you were just another beggar. Chief Okafor stood, dusting himself off slowly. The pride that had once defined him, the man who had built an empire, now seemed buried beneath the humiliation of the moment, but his eyes remained calm, as though this was all part of the plan. That's exactly the point, my son, he said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of disappointment. It doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter if you walk past people who are poor, homeless, or struggling. You can have everything, but if you can't see the humanity in others, then you've lost something far more valuable than wealth. You've lost your soul. Chijioke stood there, paralyzed. His father's words hit him like a freight train, every word sinking deeper into his heart, forcing him to confront the painful truth that had been there all along. The wealth, the privilege, it had blinded him. He had taken it all for granted. The people who had helped him along the way, the ones who had supported him, had all been mere tools for his advancement in his mind. But now, he saw it, the emptiness that came from caring for nothing but appearances. I thought I raised you to be better than this, Chijioke. Chief Okafor continued, his voice breaking just slightly, but enough to show the depth of his heartache. I never wanted you to be like them, the people who see others as means to an end, who look down on others because they are poor or vulnerable. This was your test. And I needed to know that you would see beyond your own reflection. Chijioke's knees felt weak. His father had been testing him, and he had failed. His entire life had been a lie built on a foundation of wealth, yes, but lacking the one thing that made it all worth it: compassion. He had dismissed his own father, and now, standing in front of him, he realized the cost of that mistake. What do you want me to do, father? Chijioke finally managed to ask, his voice desperate. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like 1,000 pounds. I want you to understand that loyalty and compassion are the true measures of a man, Chief Okafor replied. And I want you to see that wealth means nothing if you cannot value the people around you. Look at me, your father, the man who gave you everything. And you walked past me. Twice. Tears welled up in Chijioke's eyes as the gravity of the moment settled over him. This wasn't just about a test. This was about the man he had become, the choices he had made, and the distance he had put between himself and the father who had sacrificed everything to give him a better life. I'm sorry, father, Chijioke whispered, his voice thick with guilt. I'm so sorry. Chief Okafor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a long look at his son, as though searching for something, some trace of the boy he had once known. Then, with a heavy sigh, he placed a hand on Chijioke's shoulder. The hardest part, my son, he said softly, is learning to forgive yourself. For the first time, Chijioke truly saw his father not as the man who built a fortune, not as the towering figure of authority, but as a man who had been tested, and who had fallen, only to rise again. And in that moment, Chijioke understood. This wasn't just a test of loyalty, it was a lesson in humility, love, and redemption. And he had reached the point of no return. Would he rise to meet the challenge, or would he continue down the path of shallow wealth and empty success? The choice was his. The revelation that shook Chijioke to his core marked the beginning of his transformation. The guilt he felt was overwhelming, yet it sparked a profound change within him. His relationship with his father, once built on superficial admiration for his wealth, deepened into one of mutual respect and understanding. Chief Okafor, though disappointed, saw potential for growth in his son, something that no amount of money could provide. Chijioke began to question everything he had once valued: his friends, his social status, his image. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time, he was willing to walk it with integrity. He sought to make amends, not just with his father, but with the people around him. Slowly, he became more involved in charitable causes, using his wealth not for flaunting, but for meaningful change. The impact of Chief Okafor's test went far beyond a simple lesson in loyalty. It was a wake-up call for a young man caught in The web of materialism. The test had revealed the essence of true wealth, compassion, humility, and the strength to be a better person. Not just for oneself, but for others. Chijioke's journey was only beginning, but the seeds of change had been sown.